Hi guys, this video is a time lapse of me making my art of my OCs as kids. I'm gonna be going over a little bit of what I think they would be like as kids. Also, I'm gonna note beforehand that one, these characters would not have interacted with each other as kids. That's just not how their lives kind of aligned. But I did just want to put kind of a cute picture of what I think they would kind of be like interacting as kids. I just thought it'd be a cute idea. And the second thing to note is that in the universe that these characters exist in, a majority of the characters are some form of supernatural creature / being, and I kind of have that broken up into three main groups: heaven or hellbound, there are alternative names to that because there isn't distinctly a heaven or a hell in this universe, but just kind of referring to kind of like underworld creatures versus these kind of like higher creatures. And the second group would be blood / earthborn creatures, which are the result of these supernatural creatures kind of reproducing, which they could be either full blood or half blood creatures, and they could be born of other bloodborne creatures or hell / heavenborn creatures. The final group of supernatural creatures would be turned. I don't necessarily have a better name for it yet. I don't know if I will find a better name, but it's creatures that have been turned into a supernatural being through some form of another, so they would have had past lives as humans. So this can typically exist as something such as ghosts, or if a human has been turned into a vampire by another vampire, of course. All of these characters exist in the last group, so they all would have had past lives as humans, hence they are human children in this video. I'm going to start off with my character Hyung. Hyung as a kid would definitely be a bit more on the outgoing side, and he definitely would not back down from things pretty easily. I think that his personality would contrast how he is in kind of his current form, which is a lot more moody and reserved. And he's kind of like that because he doesn't really have much memory of his childhood or his life before being turned, essentially. Kind of gets reanimated against his will is essentially what happens. But yeah, opposing that, he'd be a lot more of an outgoing child. I do also believe that an important aspect of his background is that he is born in Korea, but his family immigrates around the 70s, so he grows up kind of in a different place. From around the 70s to the 80s is the span of time in which he's growing up, really. Admittedly, I don't have that much of his childhood really mapped out. I feel like a lot of the important stuff tends to happen to him as he starts reaching his teenage years. I do believe that he would get into a lot of more alternative styles and would kind of hang out in those kinds of groups of people. He just isn't really afraid to stand up for certain things that he believes in, and it could be kind of off-putting to other people, but definitely him and the group of people that he would hang around with would be a lot more progressive in comparison to other people around them. And mind you that a lot of that would probably come from the fact that, one, he is an immigrant, and kind of the way how he gets treated because of that would definitely affect a lot of like who he is. And I definitely think that him and his parents would kind of be the main thing that, I wouldn't say causes a rift. I can't figure out the exact word that I want to use here, but whereas they don't really want to like stand out too much or cause too much trouble, which is understandable considering how they get treated by other people, and they just want to ensure that they just kind of live as safely and peacefully as possible. He would not really be as afraid to start shit. And I do also think that another impactor of that is that this character is gay, which would have another kind of important effect on both who he is as a person, especially during that time, and his relationship with his parents. I don't want to go too much into his full backstory here, because I am mostly talking about like them as kids, or I guess at their younger ages. But if you guys do want me to go over like different backstories for each of the characters and kind of have their own standalone videos, then I can do that. Yeah, essentially outgoing, a little bit of a troublemaker, alternative, doesn't back down easy. Those are kind of the main important parts of his story. I guess to go on to the second character, I can talk about Abrielle. Abrielle is also a lot more outgoing, but I think she'd be a troublemaker more in the sense of she really is just a troublemaker. I think Abrielle as a kid would just be full of too much energy and would literally just start shit just because she can. And that's the kind of child she is. I don't think she'd be a bully by any means, definitely quite the opposite, but she'd definitely be kind of like an overwhelming kind of presence and force, which is kind of similar to how she is in her current state, although I think a lot of those aspects of her personality, I think that as a kid would kind of cool down more into her teenage years, and then with the series of events that leads her to getting turned, she'd kind of go back into that and up that part of her personality again, but more as a coping mechanism. But as she is as a child, that's just how she is. She's really loud and will just say, I guess, whatever would come to her mind. And here, her outfit is a lot more, not like super chaotic, but I think she'd definitely be a bit more on the chaotic side of things, especially with how she dresses as a kid. I think by the time she gets to her teenage years, she'd be a lot more of what would be considered stylish, but again, a bit more into like the alternative types of styles. But she doesn't really fit into like a specific subculture. She just kind of does whatever she wants to do. And another important aspect of her background is, and this also leads into a really big part of her backstory, again, though I'm not going to go over that. But she does live in a home with divorced parents, so her parents do end up separating, and that kind of affects a lot of how she grows up. She does live with her mom, and when her parents do end up separating, she doesn't really have a lot of contact with her dad, which is definitely an important part of her backstory and how things kind of play out for her from there. But to sum up her character, she's very outgoing, rambunctious, kind of does what she wants, and also suffers from a little bit of abandonment issues, mostly in regards to her dad. The final character that I'm going to be going over is Deion, the poor one, kind of crying in the left. I really like Deion's character because he's kind of like a teddy bear-like character, I guess is the best way to put it. He's a lot more sweet than the other characters are, just naturally his personality, and I guess a bit more on the sensitive side. I do imagine his family also are immigrants, similarly to Hyung, although he kind of exists in like the 2000s, 2010s is kind of his childhood. So yeah, technically he's younger than Hyung, and so is Abrielle, but just the way how their stories kind of line up and how everything plays out, you know, weird supernatural shit goes on. But yeah, Deion as a kid would be a lot more sensitive, not much of a troublemaker, and just kind of wants to be friends with everybody. I imagine like his family, he'd have a lot more siblings. I forgot to mention this with Hyung, actually. Hyung is supposed to have a younger sibling. Abrielle is an only child, and I think maybe that shows. And Deion would have a few younger siblings and an older sibling. His family is definitely the kind of very supportive kind, and he's very close with his family. I'd imagine he'd be close with both of his parents. But in school, I think he'd kind of have a hard time getting along with people, especially mostly in high school, and that's kind of an important part of his backstory. I feel like most of their like backstories start to like ramp up during around high school and their high school years. In elementary school, I don't think it'd be as hard for him to make friends, because you know how little kids are. They're just kind of like, they're not worried about the same thing that teenagers are, and you know, the same kind of stupid shit. But I think he'd definitely have kind of a harder time dealing with bullies. He's not like the type who will just like fight people, which is why kind of in the picture here, I'm kind of imagining like some kids were like fucking with him, and you have like Abrielle here telling them off completely, and Hyung's just kind of like there behind her like, yeah, fuck you guys. But yeah, he'd be a lot more of a nerdy kid, I think. Super into reading, and he'd be okay with academic stuff, but he's more so into learning about the things that he likes to learn, kind of like on his own. And I guess in that way he's kind of like me, or at least how I was as a child. When I was a kid, I used to be super into watching documentaries, and I had like a crap ton of encyclopedias, and I used to be completely obsessed with dinosaurs. I don't have nearly as much dinosaur knowledge as I did then, which makes me kind of sad. Mostly has to do with other stuff in my life, but that's not important. So I guess he's kind of loosely, I like to put certain aspects of myself into each of my characters, I think. But that would be the thing that stands out, is that he's just like a nerdy fucking kid, and he wants a lot of friends, but he doesn't always know how to go about making new friends. So yeah, I guess this is probably not the best explanation of my characters and how they are as kids. I tried to make a script for it, but then I didn't really finish, and even for the parts that I did write out, I kind of ended up going on my own tangents anyways. But yeah, that's a little bit about my OCs. I think it'd be easier if I could make actual full videos about each of them individually and going over their full backstories, because their backstories are a lot more planned out, in depth. I didn't really think too much about how they'd be as kids, although I kind of know based on like their general personalities, but it's definitely something I'll think about more. So let me know if you guys enjoyed that, if you'd be interested in learning more about each character's, what you thought of the art, maybe whatever you want to comment on. Any feedback too, that'd always be nice, because I do want to know what kind of content would kind of be the most appealing to other people. And yeah, if you like the video, you can give me a like. If not, then don't. And that's the end of the video, and I should be showing the final art soon.